Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to the Kazakhstan news show. We are actually just over a year, no, 2 years of the news show. So the 15th of August was actually the first one 2 years ago. So we're well into 2 years of the news show, pretty much every Monday since then. So today's news show is brought to you by the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android. Because we're starting with weightlifting today, as always, check out the weightlifting programs on the Sika Strength app. We've got a mainstream weightlifting program, we've got Snatch specific weightlifting programs, we've got clean specific weightlifting programs, we've got jerk specific weightlifting programs. We also have strength specific programs like the RTA squat program 1 and 2, infamous but very productive, deadlift programs, 2 different pressing programs, and maybe some conditioning programs for the weightlifters. Would that be too bad of a thing? Now, there's a massive announcement with this, that there's a new program about to be released, and it's called Sika Body Armor. This is Sika Body Armor Upper Body, and it's all of your upper body hypertrophy and bodybuilding work to get absolutely jacked, but also to make yourself a bit more resilient to be able to lift those weights and stave off those owies a bit more. So in honor of that, I'm just going to sit like this for the whole new show. So first up, we have got Artem Okullov. He actually was a last minute entry. So he had this 175 kilo hang snatch. Artem is a Russian weightlifter. Obviously, we've seen him usually compete as an 85 back in the DIY. We haven't seen him on the international platform. You may remember he's done such lifts as the 190 kilo hang snatch as an 85, 180 kilo double. So this 175 is a very, very beautiful lift from him and well within his capabilities. Will we see Russian lifters of this crop on the international platform again? That's always what comes into my mind when we see they post some lifts. What this particular hang snatch, the real standout thing, you can see it across all of Okullov's hang work, is it usually to initiate the hang snatch, we'll have a small bend in the knee, but then we basically just push our hips back. We really get a hip hinge going. Then we get down into those kind of lower positions. We might get some knee bend going again. You'll see here he does a very synchronous or very concurrent knee bend and hip flexion, and it just works really, really well. You see he drops down into that position almost immediately. It's a very kind of vertical drop down into the hang position, rather than it being more of that hip hinge, rather than the barbell having to work harder to keep the barbell into you and stop it swinging away. It just works very, very nicely. Now, next up, probably some of the biggest news of weightlifting this week, certainly after the Olympics, is, as you know, this year we're not going to be hosting. We're going to be seeing another World Championships. Up until Tokyo 2021, we used to never have a weightlifting World Championships the year of the Olympics in weightlifting. But since then it started, and now we have World Championships every year. Especially this year we need it more than ever because we had so few athletes of the elite crop going to the Olympics. We had it reduced down to just inside those triple digits. I think it was like 110 or something specifically, which is a massive drop off from Tokyo and Rio and London. So this year we're seeing a World Championships. Now you might have noticed as well, at the same time that we had Kazakhstan omitted from the Olympics, we had none of their great lifters, and they're a fantastic weightlifting nation. We of course had too many positive drug tests for Kazakhstan, and it looks like they may be returning for this year's Worlds. So normally when you get, or at the moment the rule is, when you get a couple of positive tests, you need to be banned for a couple of years. You may remember Romania, for example, was banned for a while. Egypt was banned. And it would seem that through some political, legal shenanigans that they might be returning this year. Now, I reached out to Artem and asked him, because he posted this, and he said that he might be competing this year. He's not sure yet, but he said he's going to prepare as such and see what happens. This is undoubtedly great news for the sport of weightlifting, especially if you're a fan. It really is. Yeah. It's going to allow for obviously more competitive athletes to be competing there. Obviously for lads like Artem who didn't have the opportunity to go to the Olympics due to whatever reason, whether it's a positive test or maybe you weren't able to qualify through that incredibly stringent qualification process, this year's Worlds is going to be quite spicy. I think we're going to see some good lifting there. And the other big positive of this is we're probably going to see the weekly Artem Antropov section of the news show returning. So if you're wondering what exactly happened, so they tested positive for a substance S23. I think it's actually a SARM, and they were able to prove that it got in their body through poor quality sports nutrition, which is contaminated meat. And So the anti-doping agencies, the ITA and the World Anti-Doping Agency, basically have a strict policy of liability for those athletes. Unless you're American weightlifters or you're Chinese swimmers, if it gets in your body and you can't prove it, then you don't get off. But here we have, it looks like Kazakhstan is in a position where they're going to be coming back. So hopefully we'll see that.
It's great to see.
No, like, let the mad bastards lift, you know?
Yeah.
Let them all lift.
Also, there is some up-and-coming young weightlifters in Kazakhstan that we want to see. Next
up, we've got a little throwback to 2019. Yes, everyone's on gear. I'm only joking. So just Lou and this one is on gear. So Larry or a Instagram page, always posts really nice, bougie-looking footage. Just posted this throwback to Liu Xiaojun, Li Dayin and Xiaojun in Wujishan in 2019, and I think I am physically attracted to this snatch from Liu.
This snatch in particular is just different gravy. So obviously Liu is always very, very smooth. He went through different phases of moving his feet and not moving his feet, but it's the speed, power and general piss and vinegar about that snatch is what really sets it aside for me. Just so nice.
Yeah, Liu was really something special, obviously worldwide and in the Chinese system. Technique, speed, physique, mobility, precision, strength. He had quite literally everything that makes great weightlifters great. And the snatch here looks like something like 150 or so. Is very, very sharp. And then we've Li Dayin doing some power snatches and Xiaojun doing some snatches as well. So everyone's jacked. Li Dayin doesn't have any weird asymmetries at the moment. They're yet to develop with this casual 130 power snatch. And Liu is here for us, 2019.
This is glory day stuff.
Yeah, we lost him, but we still have those times together. You know, we can all remember those. So Liu and the boys back at it. We probably lost Xi as well, maybe lost Liu since then. So hopefully, I'm hoping for a Li Dayin turnaround, like sort these injuries, coming out hot. Hopefully at this year's Worlds.
It's crazy to think 2019 was half a decade ago.
Stop it. So next up we've got Xiaojun in a training montage. So this is posted by Primal Physio, and this is his build up into the 2024 Olympics from his tough time at Thailand to, unfortunately, his tougher time at the Paris Games.
Yeah, one big kind of standout point here is just how much of the heavy strength work is going on. Now, obviously, videos like this, these kind of montages are always skewed towards the heavier lifts, the more difficult attempts. But there's a lot of very heavy snatch deadlifts, clean deadlifts in there. Obviously, there's really good heavy attempts at snatch, heavy attempts at clean and jerk. We're watching one right now. But it always surprises me how heavy that Chinese team go on some of those pulls, particularly considering some of the trials and tribulations that their backs go through.
So it looks like the heaviest clean and jerk we see here actually right now is 192 clean and jerk, and this probably is the heaviest clean and jerk he's hit this year, maybe in the last 18 months or so. So we don't really know what exactly he hit, but it seems to be a 192, and there looks to be some late 150 snatches there, maybe late 160s. It's hard to tell exactly what the weight is, so maybe we might see some heavier lifts. Maybe she might post some of some bigger attempts he did in the lead up to the Olympics if he did anything heavier. But it won't bring the gold back, unfortunately, much to many of us and weightlifting fans' dismay. Now, here is a, but won't bring the bronze back. We've got Marin of Moldova posting the post-Olympic lifts of his best training lifts. Now, there's quite a few of them in here. And the first one we're starting off with is a 210 kilo clean and jerk.
Yeah, the clean jerk here looks very nice. His clean position always kind of puzzles me somewhat. He seems to really get his feet back behind him, and then he has a small bit of weird internal rotation in his hips, where he definitely has that knee kind of tracking over his big toe. We saw some of that at the Olympics. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of stuff coming out, or he's been posting a lot of stuff just about his disappointment with what happened at the games or how he felt that should have gone. But these lifts look very good. Like, he definitely had plenty left in the tank at the Olympics.
He also had some 180 kilo snatches. So he posted two different ones. Now, you remember he did 175 at the Olympics. So this is a pretty good training to comp snatch ratio. 185s are very, very sharp, very powerful lifter. A little bit unorthodox in his positions, like his bottom position, like Dara talked about there. Pull is pretty straightforward. Like, it follows those templates of good technique. You know, you can't really snatch 180 without following those templates, a good technique. But, you know, his anatomical positions certainly leave his lifting interesting. We also have some heavy squats, so 290 kilo squat. Notably about this squat is it's not as deep as we normally see weightlifters squatting. And the interesting thing about that is that once you're a super advanced lifter, there is some benefits to lifting heavier weights, and then there's some benefits to lifting slightly lighter weights for a greater range of motion. Now for Marin, for him, there's probably a benefit to just moving 290 with a little bit less range of motion, maybe not completely ass to grass, but then he is practicing the full snatch and the full clean and jerk so often, and he's definitely doing front squats, or I'd have to imagine he is, that he's getting a lot of the stimulus in the bottom position. So it's kind of a trade-off here that's likely to benefit him a lot. You know, if we look at someone like Xiaojun used to do that, he used to squat just slightly higher than he might bottom out in his snatch. Still very deep squats, of course. Ilya was famous for doing it in his front squats for a period of time, and we've, you know, Kianush Rastami also, when he was back squatting, didn't always bury his heaviest back squats. It really is a trait or an attribute that we can only allow for really advanced, super high level lifters. For everyone else, it's definitely a better idea for us full depth squats. Now you might have an immediate question there and say, oh, would it not be more beneficial if Marin did 290 to a full depth? And the answer would be yeah, but it might not be feasible, it might not be necessary, and it doesn't seem to be really the defining factor in his lifts. If we look at, you know, his snatch or his clean and jerk.
The last thing I want to say here is lads need to stop wearing mismatched shoes. That is not right. Leave it go.
It's certainly a thing. Now, really interesting thing where we have some 180 kilos for triple clean deadlifts, and the really interesting thing, I didn't think he'd have such a strong pull. I don't know why I didn't think that. I'm just kind of surprised at him doing 280 kilos for a triple. Actually, a touch and go triple.
A very easy looking triple as well, considering how fast that first rep is. Looks really, really good. The other noteworthy point from this is just that upper back position, how easily he maintains that upper back position as he goes throughout the pull. Now you're looking at this thinking clean deadlift, what's the difference? Like, the big difference you're going to see here is those knees sweeping back and out of the way. If that was a normal powerlifting conventional deadlift, obviously he'd be wearing flat shoes as well to make it a bit easier, but also he'd be keeping his knees forward, his knees engaged, or his quads engaged a small bit longer. The clean deadlift is a much more difficult variation. It's only a small difference, but it is very noteworthy. Particularly, it's more difficult to maintain that good upper back position. Your shoulders tend to get pulled forward and down a bit more when the weights get that heavy.
And second lastly, we've got this 165 kilo power snatch, which is pretty in line with the 180. If it's power snatching 165, you might be expecting to see a little bit more than 180, but we don't really know. This looks pretty routine for him. And we also have a 180 kilo snatch that he just posted today as well. So I assume there's several of these, and hopefully we get to see a lot more of them, because this is one of the best parts in weightlifting, is just how many post-lift max attempts we get. If you look at this 180, for example, it's a good example of him catching it quite low, you know, compared to his back squat. Again, it's not a critique or anything, it's simply just a comparison of the things he's doing, and an interesting take in his training. Now here we've got someone who's not cutting the squat, and this is YangJay, the South Korean super heavyweight, squatting 330 kilos.
We've seen YangJay a number of times on the new show, and it's always for crazy big lifts like this. What I want you to look at for this lift is just how quickly he sits down and how controlled he is with 330 or 350 kilos. It doesn't.
330.
Is it 330?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense in my brain when you look at that. Like, you see very, very strong weightlifters, like the Japanese super heavy Tank Murakami. You see him lifting weights similar to this, and you see how much vibration and how much movement there is. In powerlifting, it's very different. The barbell is much stiffer. There's less whip on the bar. The plates sit much closer to the center of the barbell, and so that level of whip, that level of kind of dynamism in the squat just isn't there. In the case for weightlifters, that's probably a normal Eleiko or ZKC bar. He has bumpers all the way out to the edge of the bar, and then he's walking the barbell out as well. There's a lot of movement going on here. It's difficult to stabilize that kind of weight. Yet in the case of YangJay, he is so stable, and then because of that, he's able to sit down amazingly fast.
What's really noteworthy about his technical positions as well is that the foot position and knee tracking Yang picks is quite interesting. So if you're a fella or a girl who has a fat dumpy, you've got big hips, you've got big legs, you got a big ass, you mightn't have the most flexible lower back, and maybe your hamstrings a little bit tight, a good way of favoring your squat and give yourself the best advantage is this kind of shoulder width squat, slightly turned out toes, just inside 45 degrees. And then we make sure that we're sitting forward with our knees. Of course, we're pushing our hips into it, but at the same time, we might be just making sure that our knees track over our toes, and this gives us room for our hips to sit forward. We keep that lower back in a good position, and then, you start maybe squatting 330. Maybe not, but it might help your squat a little bit. Next up, we've got a Ukrainian weightlifter. It's Vladik96 on Instagram, and he's a series of great lifts, but I just wanted to put up this 170 kilo snatch.
This is an absolutely gorgeous looking snatch. So technically, he's hitting all those markers. He doesn't have any weird quirks or anything like that. This is probably as close to textbook model as you're going to see a relatively unknown lifter hit 170 using. But the other thing you have to consider here is, I'm not sure what his personal situation is, but for Ukrainian athletes, training now is incredibly difficult. So for someone like him to still be in this really, really good shape, to still be making very good progress and getting up to world-class weights, because these definitely are world-class weights, it's no joke.
So the interesting thing about the 96 kilo class, assuming he's a 96 here, is it could be the birth year, but if you look at the 96 kilo class, and we would have had in London the 94 kilo category, which is an amazing category with big weights. We really got to miss out on what some of those athletes did, because some of them had to cut down, which definitely impacted their performance. Some of them moved up, Miso moved up, for example, and for some of them it benefits them, but not a lot of them might be suited to that 102 category, and we might have seen a big change in their results, and maybe in some circumstances we might have seen the snatch deteriorate, for example, if they just don't have the frame to hold that weight. So when we get so few categories and we get them in kind of weird segments like 89 to 102, just feels like a bit too much. And then 89 to 73 seems like a lot as well. I know there's political reasons we ended up with that, but it does make you lament just how important those spreads are and those kind of 7 to 8 kilo jumps in classes. Really lets us see what each segment of humanity is kind of capable of in the weightlifting factor. So it'd be interesting to see Worlds goes like this year with the full gambit.
Yeah, it really just means those results are more genetically predetermined than if you had more of those weight classes.
Next up, we've got Garrick of Armenia. So you may remember him from just the 102 class at the Olympics gone. A very happy hang snatcher, always posting some big hang snatches. But he posted up this post-Olympics footage of him snatching 195 kilos, which of course is in excess of the 102 kilo world record currently. And it looks very routine, very casual.
This is absurdly easy.
He's Team Big Stamp.
Big Stamp.
Team Big Stamp.
I myself am Team Big Stamp, but
yes,
not with 195 kilos on the hang snatch. The other thing, obviously, besides the big stamp and the incredible speed and power in that, is just how secure that is overhead. Like, that lockout is phenomenal, and he carries a lot of muscle in his arms as well, which obviously makes it look even better.
Anatomically, you guys aren't unlike, even down to the blue rams,
Just the performance outcomes are different.
Yeah, the hang snatch outcomes might be slightly skewed.
Yeah.
Now, in other lifts from the post-Olympic era, this is some of the best Instagram time for lifting if you're new to weightlifting. And this is Keydmar, the Venezuelan fridge, posting a 235 kilo just above the knee block clean. Now, Keydmar, Clean&Jerk, somewhere in the 210 kilo region, and he was an 89 kilo lifter, and I'm pretty sure this is when he was an 89, so he used to be a very good 96 kilo lifter. He obviously came back to the 89s. He said it's a throwback Thursday. It looks to be he's at 89 kilo body. He looks quite slim here, so if that is the case, if he's weighing 91 or maybe 92, this is a gargantuan lift from blocks if you put it in perspective.
This does bring up another case here, another point where the variation kind of makes something a bit more obvious. So if you'd watched Keydmar lifting at the Olympics, you would have seen the jump back he has, both on the snatch, but particularly on the clean. you see he jumps back quite a lot. Now, in this case, when we're working from blocks, and particularly block work from above the knee, we tend to have less of a jump back. So there's less deviation in the barbell. We tend to reef on the barbell a little bit less. We have a bit less time to get underneath because we don't have the same acceleration coming into the start of that second pull. And so because of that, we tend to see less of a jump back. Now, in this case, we still see a significant jump back, which is coming from a number of errors maybe, but it is just interesting to see, even in a variation like this, we have that commonality of technique or commonality of fault.
Moving on to the strength section of our new show, we have got the 1 rep max, or Maxim Shethar. I feel like Shethar seems more accurate, but he squatted a PB of 800 pounds. So Maxim is someone who squat we love, big fan of it. Low bar, super deep, and of course making this look very routine. So this looks like it's pretty well within his capabilities in terms of more there for the future. So this is 363 kilos. 800 pound mark is obviously a gargantuan one for anyone squatting any weight at any body weight, and so Maxim destroying this with consistently great technique is what I love about this. So it's great when you hit a squat PB and you're on road for more, you're on the road to anywhere for anywhere more, you hit that PB and you use a technique that's really consistent, reliable. And this is why we're always talking about technical movements for the squat, bench and deadlift. It's not that they're super complicated movements, but if you give yourself the best technical opportunity for yourself, it's not that we're worried you're going to injure yourself to use poor technique. We're always worried about performance outcomes. That's our primary goal. And when you find this technical model and you obey good technique, and then you can make it reproducible, once you hit your PBs, you're leaving yourself with room for loads more in the future. Could you bullshit up a PB with worse technique? Sure, but you're really capping yourself in terms of your future potential and what you can do reliably and reproducibly. So when we're in a position like this, this is how you want to be hitting most of your PBs, especially if they're 800 pounds.
It's such a good looking squat. Mm-hmm. This is obviously the massive advantage as well of having a brother who's a few years older than you, who is an incredible technician who can kind of form you and guide you along the way. You know, a lot of us we're trying to figure this out on our own when we're kind of teenagers, but obviously having someone with that kind of knowledge behind you or that kind of support there makes a massive difference.
So this also gives low bar a good name as well, you know, which shouldn't. I joke. Next up, giving low bar a good name as well, is Timur of Georgia, and he's lifting outside in what I can only imagine is a outdoor gym somewhere in the woods in Georgia, which would make sense if children grow up playing in powerlifting gyms in the woods. It makes sense for a lot of their sporting outcomes, like the judo athletes, their powerlifters, their weightlifters. This makes sense now, I suppose. Like if just gyms just obviously grow in the woods in Georgia. Yeah. And everyone minimum 380 squat, I assume.
That's where you keep the barbell and plates, is in the woods.
Yeah, you just leave 380 on the bar. Yeah. And then you just keep attempting it until you kind of squat it. And then you're just getting a citizenship then, is it?
Well, you buy the squat rack, barbell and plates, and you load 380 on. Yeah. And you just keep trying that all the time.
No, I think that looks like it's grown in the woods. I think that's a fruit.
It actually grew there?
That looks like it to me. Tell me it didn't.
Yeah, I love this squat rack because this squat rack is what an engineer would build if they were like, no, it just has to be the same height. I just want it this wide apart. They're like, no, obviously I'd make it all in one piece. And obviously I'd have big, long 45-degree pieces coming off it to make it really stable. And then clearly I'd use 60 by 60 5mm thickness angle iron to make the base because that's the strongest stuff.
You can't say that's not a good squat rack.
That's an amazing squat rack.
The only problem with that squat rack is you can't do anything else with that squat rack.
No.
But if you're squatting 380.
But it's like all the area inside there is clear. You know, with H-stands, sometimes the little legs get in your way as you're unracking the bar. Mm-hmm. Maybe if they're freestanding units, one time you put the right side in and then the left side you can't quite get it in. Everything there is solid. That's a perfect squat rack.
If you're squatting 380. Next up, we've got Brianni Terry. So she deadlifted. This is the heaviest raw deadlift done in competition by a female on a stiff barbell. I think she also has the heaviest raw deadlift, or one of the highest raw deadlifts, at 293 kilos. It's not the heaviest raw deadlift in competition. And this 277.5 kilo is the heaviest female in comp with a stiff bar.
There's 2 or 3 things I really like about this. Now, the first thing I like about this is the fact that her sumo stance is not crazy wide. I think we see a lot of people really trying to kind of maximize, or whatever you want to say, really get that stance as wide as possible, the grip as narrow as possible, hunch over the upper back and kind of shorten all those ranges, which is okay. Like, you're in sport, you're trying to achieve a tactical advantage by doing that. In this case, these are really nice textbook positions. Back angles are really good. The stance is as wide as it needs to be. The grip width is straight down from the shoulders. There's nothing weird there. Everything looks really, really good. Now, the second part I love about this is just how fast that pull is. There's no kind of whipping the slack out of the bar. Obviously, the stiff bar is something we'll talk about in a sec. But the pull is fast the entire way through. And when we get to the top end of a lot of these sumo deadlifters, particularly sumo deadlifters at the lighter weight classes, they will have quite a strong first pull. Then as they go to lockout, they might have a good lockout, but that final area, that last 10-15% of the lockout, they'll have a lot of struggle with, and their grips tend to fail very, very commonly. In this case, really fast pull throughout, no errors with grips, no issues with grip the entire way through, and it just looks to be another symptom of a very well-rounded and powerful athlete. The last thing then is just the stiff bar. I think the stiff bar is the way you should be going for powerlifting competition. I think you should be going with just a standard powerlifting bar. Whatever you want to make that standard, just make it and stick to it. I don't necessarily like the idea of a different squat bar, a different deadlift bar, maybe use a squat bar for the bench press then. I don't like that quite so much. I think it makes the records a bit more ambiguous. I think it's harder for us to reference across different weight classes and different federations. I think you should have a homogenous bar across all 3 lifts, across all the federations, and just make things a bit more standardized.
Next up, we've got John Hack, who's really coming into his own in this particular peak here. Was actually in Ireland, or is in Ireland at the moment. So he was squatting in City Gym in Limerick, so one of Ireland's longest running powerlifting gyms. The guys are great there, and they've been around for quite a while, and they're definitely one of the bigger people on the scene in Ireland. I know there's not a load of powerlifting gyms, but they've been consistently at it for years now, well over a decade or more now, I'd say, at this stage.
Those lads have come hard and come for a long time.
We have John Hack squatting 355 kilos here, and I have to say I can't remember any of his other heavy squats looking this, both 1 deep and 2 as easy as this. So this looks very, very easy, especially when you think traveling, new gym, different environment. It all adds up, but this looks fantastic. This looks so good. This has to be the best his squat has looked in any prep in a long time, from what I can remember at least.
There's even a noticeable difference in this squat from what we saw back in kind of mid-July, start of July, in those training sessions he had up on YouTube. I'm not quite sure when those training sessions were recorded, but there's definitely a noted difference here. Obviously, he is training hard for competition. He is in the middle of a big cycle, but this is a very, very good looking squat. I will note as well, the guy reaching around to pop the belt off is a bit of a move.
It is certainly, you want to get some of John Hack's strength, and maybe if you can unleash the belt, you get some.
That strength is living right there, like if you can just touch it.
Also, some massive performances from the weekend. We have Dave doing his best to be great at powerlifting as usual. So he was at the ABS Pro, or the ABS Pro 6, where he won gold, 121 kilo body weight, 121.9. He did a 405 kilo squat, 245 kilo deadlift, and a 435 kilo conventional deadlift. And Dave's doing them in his kind of typical fashion. You know, it's 6 working days to do the squat, but he buries them. He gets them nice and low. And obviously this is a massive squat at 121 kilos for 405. Bench, 245. He's not our typical anatomical kind of bench freak where, you'd be expecting to see. He's certainly built for conventional, but he really makes his bench and his squat work. The squat, most interesting of all, is one of his more impressive lifts, in my opinion, not only because it's just a crazy weight, but given his anatomy to make it work, he makes it work.
Now, I want to just give some context to this, right? In the way of being a better communicator. But it's a total of 1,085, let's say 1,090 kilos. So that's 363 kilos average across all 3 lifts if he did the same weight on all of them, and he weighs 120 kilos. He's doing astronomical. Obviously 120 kilos is big, 120 kilos is heavy, but like if you're playing any level of rugby at all, you're around a lot of 120 kilo people. It's the same if you're playing football or anything like that. There's a lot of 120 kilo dudes around. Most of them aren't doing over 1,000 kilo totals. I will say none of them are.
I just thought he weighed more. I thought he was like 20 or 30 kilos more, but 122 kilos is quite the feat. Now, we also had, at the past weekend gone, we had the strongmen going at it at the strongest man on earth. So this was Brian Shaw's competition, and we had obviously the very heavy raw deadlift, so just using straps. And we had 2 big players going for it. We had Mitchell Hooper up first with a 438 kilo deadlift, which is 966 pounds. And this was a raw comp PB for him. And he ended up winning the whole event, but he didn't win this event. So he won the whole competition. He didn't win this event though. Hafthor won this with 449.5 kilos. So not quite the 450, but I think he would have made 450 looking at this.
I think you would, yeah.
So Hafthor ended up winning this particular deadlift event.
Now, when you're looking at this, Hafthor does just look a bit different. He looks bigger than the rest of the lads. I've seen a picture of the podium from this competition. Hafthor is a slightly different model to the standard human, or a very different model. Like just his height, he should not be able to deadlift that well, but he does. But his height, the width of his frame, he just carries a lot more size, even if the weight isn't that different. I remember the weights being kind of thrown around a lot more, that he was over 200 kilos body weight at one time. But the size of his frame is just so apparent on these videos and on the videos of the competition from this weekend. I will say I love this. I love to see kind of 2 people being left out there at the end really battling for it.
So what strongman does really well in comparison to the other strength sports is the fact that it is very good at making the show an actual show. So making the competition something that's a bit of a spectacle. You know, we're seeing all the big competitions in the last few years really packed out, really busy, really full seats, which is fantastic. And it's something, part of the thing are getting there with, you know, they have things like Sheffield, which a lot of people are saying is one of the best competitions they've been to. For example, then unfortunately, if we compare it to weightlifting, we've got issues with, you know, lifters trying to stay on the platform for a few seconds longer and a technical official comes up. And even if the competition is over and they've won, they're clearing them off and all this nonsense. And we're kind of stuck a little bit in the traditionalism in that regard. You know, we need to have characters in those sports, and we need to have a bit of interaction with the crowd. A bit of pageantry is great. You know, we were at a couple of the sessions, the Olympics, we had the super heavies, we're really getting the crowd going, and you need those individuals for the sport. It's very, very important for sports to have maybe not relatable individuals, but admirable individuals. And strongman is really good at giving them the opportunity to have their moments with their events, and they're building up to something. And you know that Hafthor and Mitchell are going to be doing a big deadlift session, and they've got their time before their lifts, and they've got a bit more freedom. Now, I know Olympic spots are a little bit different, but I have to say that there's a reason the most famous strength athletes in the non-strength training sphere are strongmen. Now, it's part of the sport too, but strongmen have also made way for them in that regard with their competitions and their media style, and they're very, very good at that, and it's definitely something weightlifting could learn from, but probably won't. Even
they did a development of those new implements, like things that look incredibly impressive. The problem with weightlifting is you'll see somebody snatch 150 kilos and then you'll see somebody snatch 100 kilos and you don't really have a visual difference. Like when you're watching it on TV, it's not clearly different. You don't really notice the extra 25 kilo plate there.
We also had BJStone competing at the weekend, and he did this 200.4 kilo axle clean and split jerk. So it was a continental clean, and then of course BJ does his little belly power clean from the top, which is very, very impressive, and then an absolute excellent split jerk. Nino's judges would have given him this one, I think.
This really is the example that we come back to. Probably in the last year we've referenced this more and more and more, but strongmen are using more dynamic and better technique every single month to get heavier weights overhead. We've talked about it numerous times. There's no reason to beat the horse to death on this one, but they are getting so much better at using a bit more speed, a bit more power, but overall just better technique to get those bars overhead, and you're just going to see those weights continue to shoot up in years to come.
Now here we've got a French thrower. He's a javelin thrower, no less. And we've got a 180 kilo full clean, which is very, very nice. So it's Frederick, and I'm not going to say his second name. And he also has a 210 kilo behind the neck split jerk. Now this was from a few weeks ago, but it was too good not to feature on the new show. Like, this is crazy, 210 kilo split jerks and 180 kilo cleans by non-weightlifters is never something to scoff at and never something to not share, in my opinion.
What I love as well when you just see athletes training, it's just that gym is empty. He's there in his own. The cones are there, probably so when people come in to do their CrossFit class, they don't walk behind him. Yet he's putting 210 and 180 kilos up like it's absolutely nothing.
If you're training in a public gym, that might be a move to bring several cones with you. So if you're doing weightlifting or squatting heavy, I've had people hit off my bar in public gyms while I've been squatting, like actively in it. I've had people reach around trying to get plates. Maybe some cones. Everyone can understand the psychology of not going past the cones. A bit of police tape as well probably wouldn't hurt. Crime scene tape plus the cones, and then I think you're really guaranteed not to have any idiots come near you.
The worst I've ever come across is having the bar on my front rack during a clean, about to go for a jerk, and somebody just reaches underneath to grab a 5 kilo plate that was off to the side.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah,
that's classic.
Yeah.
Now, we had a big weekend on BJJ. I know a lot of you don't follow BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but some of you do. We had the ADCC and the CGI event. And for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, $1 million for an athlete is a gargantuan sum. And we had $2 million prizes given out at the Craig Jones Invitational. And one of these individuals was Nicky Rod. He won this in a pretty not easy fashion, but definitely a dominant fashion for $1 million in a pretty packed arena.
The Natty King.
Yes.
Having watched a good few of these fights and the highlights of pretty much all of them, I will say CGI, the event this weekend, was unbelievably good. It's a stark contrast to what we saw at the ADCC this weekend. Obviously, those two events were competing heavily against each other in a war of words. But CGI, $1 million for over 80 kilos, $1 million under 80 kilos, and then another $1 million was going to the rest of the field, basically, and kind of being divided up between second place and 16th place in each of those brackets. There's a couple of really big super fights as well, which I don't believe there's prize money for. But the last thing about this event that is kind of a massive standout is how much money is going to charity. So I believe they've kind of 2 or 3 big charities involved, and they're just pumping massive amounts of money and donations into them.
We also had a big upset on the ADCC. So we had Michael Pixley versus Nicholas Marigali, one of the best at Jiu-Jitsu at the moment, no doubt, when it comes to Nicholas Marigali. Certainly in the gi, but he's doing a lot of training in no gi. And Michael Pixley was very much the underdog coming into this particular event. And some great vlogs of him. We were watching him last year on Daisy Fresh vlogs. Really great. Really coming to a place of disadvantage training when it comes to these athletes. And Michael hit him with a very slick throw, hit Marigali with a very nice throw. Looks like Marigali posted with his arms, which if anyone do judo or jiu-jitsu, you'd know you should never post your arm when you're falling. Unfortunately, Marigali posted and ended up potentially dislocating his shoulder on the way down. And as a result, then we had Michael Pixley come in with a head and arm choke and just finished him in a tap, which was really unexpected. Like, seriously, there's no way I would have put money on Pixley winning this. Not because he's a great athlete, but Marigali has been such a dominant athlete kind of since the last ADCC in the no-gi work, and certainly in the gi, that it was definitely a big upset. But I'll be honest with you, I love to see it. It's fantastic.
No, I absolutely love to see it. Obviously, when you see a world leader getting beaten, it's always good. It's always good to see up-and-comers kind of coming in there, disturbing or flipping the apple cart is always a great thing in sport. But particularly when it comes for an athlete like this, I think it means even more. I'm not sure if he's still training at Daisy Fresh. I hope he is. But that Daisy Fresh crew is one of, if you don't even do jiu-jitsu, if you've never been to a gym, just look up Daisy Fresh training vlogs. They're called Daisy Fresh because it was an old kind of abandoned laundry mat that they stripped out, put some mats in there. Guys are sleeping in their cars, they're sleeping in plywood boxes at the back of the gym, or else they're just sleeping on the mat. They are as gritty and as genuine a sporting franchise as you could ever come across. Now they have a fantastic, really modern facility, but go back and look at some of those vlogs and just listen to those guys speaking about it. And that's grassroots sport growing entirely up to the upper level of achievement, and it's unbelievable to see.
Is it a Harigoshi for any of the judo people? I'm going to taser them in the bottom of the foot. And Duplessis, how do you say that? Is Duplessis? Is that correct? Duplessis.
I don't know.
You said he finds he can't prepare with anyone else. He said this is the best, and obviously he ended up beating Israel Adesanya at the weekend. So maybe it's not something you should try, but it certainly paid off for him in this training camp.
As a coach, right? Definitely doing a good job of getting some marketing in there anyway.
Lastly, we have just this clip of a lot of different of the Olympians in the non-strength sport in their training hall in the Olympic Village doing some variations of the Olympic lifts. Plenty of hang power snatches, some dumbbell split jerks here, lots of like little block snatches. So very, very interesting to see that lots of these Olympians are using Olympic lifts, because were you to look at, for example, social media, you would think that no coach is using the Olympic lifts anymore with their athletes, that they're terrible and it's no use and they actually don't give you any benefits. And we're kind of on the fence that if you can teach them, it's useful to use them with the right athletes in the right cases. It can be very beneficial. And we'll see a lot of people taking this flag in the sand and saying that they never use them and it doesn't make any athletes faster, and that it's actually bad for those athletes in particular, which is really interesting to see just so many athletes. And there's a couple of these clips of them using variations of weightlifting movements.
I think that brings up an interesting point of a lot of the time we'll talk about how experienced the coach is with them, or particularly how experienced the coach is with coaching athletes to use the Olympic lifts. Obviously, we have restricted times that you actually have access to athletes for. You also have a very, very low tolerance for risk when it comes to making sure those athletes don't get any tweaks, any bits of information, any risk of injury or any increase to that risk of injury because they're in the weight room. And so a lot of coaches just stay away from them. To be honest, in the case in the past where I've come across coaches who really don't like them, it's not so much that the coach couldn't learn how to coach it, but in many cases the coach themselves were just never able to do it. And so then there was a negative connotation before it came from anywhere else. One thing I would like to say to kind of piggyback on this video, and it's a slight tangent to this, is I'm not a massive fan of how the training hall looks. I think there's a lot of stuff all over the place. There doesn't seem to be very well defined working areas here. This looks like kind of what a good college gym would look like, a kind of general gym. A lot of equipment, a lot of space. But surely for something like the Olympic training hall, you could have a much better setup than that.
Now, it's also worth noting that just because Olympians do it doesn't make it a good idea. It's very likely they'll do a lot of stupid stuff that doesn't do anything for them. But that's by and by, and I suppose just by context and everything. Hope you enjoyed today's news show. Thank you for everyone who sent stuff into the news show. Remember, don't tag us in the comments, although you can, but please DM us the stuff you want to enter for news show. We'll look through every single one of those to make sure that we get the best news show possible. And we're very grateful for everyone who sends those in, as it does make the news show a lot better, because you see far more, you know, if there's 10,000 people looking out for stuff, you'll see a lot more than the two of us, but on Instagram. So we're very, very grateful for that. So thanks for sending those in. And don't forget to check out the Sikastrength app on iOS and Android. An athlete, powerlifter, weightlifter, we've got stuff on there for all of you. 7-day free trial for everyone who signs up. We won't take your money before the end of the 7 days, so you can have a look around. You can check out the programs and see what one you might like.